Hi, I'm Deb.
This is Frankie V.
I'm Grant.
Hi, this is Phil.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Steven.
Hi, I'm Joe.
Hi, I'm Matt.
We're Tim and Terry.
I'm Susan.
Hi, this is Phil.
Seminary Dropout is supported by listeners like you and me.
Seminary Dropout is supported by listeners easy.
Just visit supportseminarydropout.com.
Just go to supportseminarydropout.com.
And I'm your host, Shane Blackshear. Interviews with leading Christian authors, leaders, and thinkers. Let's go.
My guest today is Bonnie Kristian. Bonnie, welcome back to Seminary Dropout.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Let's start here. Why don't you tell everyone who you are, what you do?
So I'm a journalist and author. For a long time, I was mainly based at The Week, but I left there earlier this summer and I'm back to freelance. So now you'll most often find me. I have a column at Christianity Today. I also am a fellow at a place called Defense Priorities, which is a foreign policy think tank. And I write for Reason magazine pretty regularly. I recently got a couple pieces of the New York Times, which was very exciting. And then I have a book coming out this fall, which is sort of the impetus for this, which is called Untrustworthy, The Knowledge Crisis, Breaking Our Brains, Polluting Our Politics, and Corrupting Christian Community. And that is my second book. And I'm very excited to have it finally get out there in the world.
So I think just by that title, a lot of people will realize what this is about and immediately kind of connect to it. What made you decide to write this book other than being a journalist for the last 6 years?
Everything. I think it's a really sort of like obviously pressing problem. And so that was a big part of it. And some of it was even just like the response that I got when I started delving into these sorts of topics in some of my articles. I think one of the pieces that I wrote that got the most feedback ever, and I ended up like talking about it on CBS, was about the boomer generation especially, like that when we were kids, they told us like, stay off the internet, like don't watch too much television, you're gonna like ruin your brain, you're gonna like, get sucked into like crazy lies on the internet. But now, it's sort of become a stereotypical figure in American politics, like the boomer who sits all day watching cable news while like posting memes on Facebook. And so it's sort of this strange experience as an adult child of this generation to like, I know a lot of people who are my peers who are looking at their parents going like, what is going on? Like, why are you in this like crazy informational space after all the warnings you gave to me? And so articles like, and it's not at all just the boomers, it's far from it. But articles like that one that looked at different angles of sort of this knowledge crisis and the way our media environment has gotten so unsettling and so confusing, got a lot of response. And so that indicated to me that there was, a real appetite for someone to delve into this, not from just like a progressive or conservative space where it's like the problem is the other side, but to hopefully look at it from a more balanced or maybe balance isn't quite the right word, but a more like politically omnivorous perspective to see that there are problems, from different parts of our politics and we're all contributing to this situation.
You mentioned the kind of stereotype about the boomer. Do we have stats on that to show? I mean, we don't know what metric you would use, but like that boomers are more vulnerable to believing false narratives or kind of being indoctrinated by that sort of thing.
Yeah, the one stat that I know off the top of my head, and I believe I say this in the book, maybe not though, is that old age is like the demographic factor that is most correlated with unwittingly sharing false information online. So like more than whether someone is a Republican or a Democrat, more than what news they consume, age is, or whether they're educated or not educated, rich or poor, age is the single greatest factor that correlates with that. And there's also some things to do with just sort of like technological prowess. So for example, there was another survey that found older users of like Facebook are more likely to think that say someone is like hand selecting what they see, like they don't really understand what an algorithm is and how they're being fed this information. But as much as there are those trends and there is some age correlation, like, you know, these levels are a lot of young people are confused about that too. So it's by no means like if you're 25, you're guaranteed to just be only reading and believing true stuff.
Yeah, so that's so interesting because I feel like you know, one of the things that that you point out in the book is that Facebook and I would assume Twitter too, they had algorithms that found out what a specific user would likely find objectionable. And then it sounded to me like the first inclination was to just show them things that they would like. But they found out that when they did that, they actually used Facebook less. So then they switched and said, well, let's start showing them things that we know they won't like.
Yeah, it was Facebook specifically, and it was a New York Times report about it. And basically, yeah, they found that if they stopped showing people like divisive, especially political stuff that made them angry and got them like emotional and worked up, people would log on less. And for them, apparently, like the ultimate metric is use sessions. It's not just accounts, because an account doesn't earn you any money if they're not logging in constantly. And so, yeah, they made a conscious choice of we're going to keep showing people stuff that gets them riled because it makes them come to our website more.
Yeah, so people who didn't grow up with this technology, I think it can be hard for them to understand that your timeline is not just first come, first serve. Like, they're not seeing everything that every one of their friends is posting that has actually been kind of curated for them to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to a large degree, and it's been really interesting. So for a long time, sort of the two things keeping me active on my personal account on Facebook was a family group and a church group that I was in. And the family group kind of just isn't busy anymore, and we moved away from that church, and so I'm very, very rarely on my personal Facebook anymore. And it's been really interesting to see, since I'm not on there interacting, when I do log in, usually like on the way to manage my professional page, like the things it throws up in my newsfeed, because it doesn't know what I want at this point, because I haven't interacted. So it's just like throwing things at the wall, like maybe you'll like this, maybe you'll like this, and they're just like things I would never engage with, because at this point it doesn't have the data to feed me precisely what would keep me there.
You know, to be real transparent, I've been really lucky enough to have parents that didn't fall in this trap. But I did have specifically a grandmother who did, before she passed about 1.5 years ago. And, you know, in our conversations, the thing that I was realizing was, it was kind of like, and I don't know if I think you and I are about the same age, Bonnie, but when I was a kid, I would go to the grocery store and see magazines, like some news magazines, and then some real newspapers. And then there was also these things next to the newspapers that looked just like the newspapers, but it was like President George H.W. Bush meeting with aliens, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And like...
Hillary Clinton adopts that boy.
Yes, exactly. And as a kid, that was extremely confusing, and because it looked just like the real newspaper. And you know, I would ask my mom, like, what's going on here, you know? And like, how come Dad reads this newspaper every day, because there's some value there, but the one right next to it is Clinton adopting Bat Boy, you know? And I felt like a real similar thing was going on with the older generation, because they're like, you know, CNN is a quote unquote a news station on the internet, and so is Breitbart, and so is like even the crazier, like farther conspiratorial stuff. It looks exactly the same to the older generation. It's news online, and so there's just a lot of confusion, and there's a way. It really is the like epistemological crisis, because there's literally like the tools to discern what's right and wrong are not there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think also, yeah, like, so my parents are not super online, but you know, sometimes my mom will get online. And there have been times where we're sitting, like, looking at the same website, and I'm saying, like, this is not a high quality site, like, you should not trust this. And she's like, well, what's wrong with it? And I'm like, look at it. Like, I look at it, and everything about this screams, this is not trustworthy. Like, you should not be reading this as a serious thing. And she's like, but tell me what's wrong. And I'm like, it's the whole thing. If you can't see it, I can't tell you. And it's just very difficult, I think, to, like, it's like learning another culture. And it's very, very, like, if someone from another country sat me down and was like, explain American culture to me, I would be like, I don't, it's the whole thing. Like, I don't know, I can't, like, just sit down and explain to you piecemeal a whole culture. And the internet is very much like that. It's hard to communicate it to someone who hasn't sort of picked it up on their own, but the process of picking it up is kind of risky, especially I think now with, like, the internet developed what it is, as opposed to, like, the much smaller scale and often more tightly controlled way that we first experienced it. And so, yeah, I don't know how you teach that. And I think, like, to what you said, especially, like, the local news site is a very easy format to imitate, and that's where a lot of these, like, they call themselves satire, but it's, like, basically intended to fool you. That's where the format that a lot of these sites go for now, and so people think they're reading, like, some small town newspaper from a town they haven't heard of, and then they're never going to see, like, the about page that says this is satire. They just think it's real.
Yeah, wow. And I think something similar happens with YouTube, where if you can produce something that looks really high quality, which the tools to do that have been made to the average person now, and so that can be very confusing. I mean, I think we saw that a lot during the pandemic when, you know, a chiropractor or whoever could make these, like, really high quality videos, and hundreds of thousands of people will believe their narrative because it looks so legit.
Yeah. Just this morning, actually, by chance, I was watching a video from the 2008 presidential election. And back then it was like, oh, like, this is so wild. Like, Obama and Ron Paul supporters, they're, like, these young kids, and they're making these YouTube videos, and, like, this is so exciting. Like, they're doing democracy, and it's all, like, so low tech. It's like some guy with his camcorder. And now, like, it's not cute anymore. It's not just some guy with his camcorder doing his little, like, homemade rap, and it's just, like, at a whole different level that can very easily fool many people.
Yeah. And you speak in the book a lot about the fallout to all of this, and not only, like, national fallout where we have things like January 6th, but the relational fallout where families have been divided and relatives have become, like, kind of people we don't even recognize anymore.
Yeah, I wonder, did you see that that tweet that was going around this past week where some woman tweeted something to the effect of, like, if you're not estranged from most of your family as a white person, I question your commitment to anti-racism. And it was like, I mean, yeah, things are probably going to get difficult, but, like, is that where we're trying to end up? Like, I don't
right.
think we want to land on estrangement. And yeah, a lot of it, I mean, I think that sort of interfamilial strife is like really common, and so much of it is driven by you know, the different information that we're consuming. I mean, and to some extent that's not new. Like, this is why there's that old norm of, like, you shouldn't talk about religion and politics, because I think we've never been super good at handling those kinds of disagreements. But it is exacerbated now by the fact that, you know, maybe 50 years ago, the thing that's going to spark your political fight is 2 times a day, right? Like, maybe the evening news and the morning paper, you've got, like, 2 times when maybe this is going to get out of hand, whereas now it's constantly on your phone. Like, at literally any moment, you could just start bickering about something.
Yeah. And I think that that's also so different from like you said, our grandparents grew up, and really our parents grew up with, I can remember this time, the news was, you either got the news in the newspaper or the nightly news, which was like an hour long. Like the idea, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think CNN was like the first cable news channel that was like 24-hour news.
Yeah, it was the 90s, and it was CNN, and didn't it, if I recall correctly, like the two of the big, wasn't like Kosovo and like the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton scandal, like those were some of the big events that they were like, we got to cover this all the time.
Yeah, well, and I think maybe Desert Storm too.
Yeah, Desert Storm, because it used to be that like sort of like at a certain hour, you just got like there was nothing playing. Like the TV would end for the night.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In the before you and I were born, like they would play like the Pledge of Allegiance or something, and then it was like off. You can tell. One thing I noticed when I watch cable news is that, boy, they are trying to fill some time. Like the minutia that they get into, and the thing that they're trying to make a big deal out of a thing that's not really a big deal. And I think that's where also the kind of the strong editorializing came into play, because you had to fill time. And then now you've got to make ratings too. So even the more bombastic personalities are the draw,
Yeah, I think on cable you see that effect a lot in two things in particular. One is like the trend piece segments where it's like, this is happening everywhere, and it's like, 3 kids have made a TikTok. And the other one is like the local crime story that gets blown up to national attention that it frankly doesn't need, but it's sort of like its own version of a trend piece of like, this problem is coming for you, and like you need to be worked up about it.
Where did the strong doubt of media, the untrusting of media, like where did that come from?
Oh man, I don't know that there's a single thing. I think on the there's sort of like some standard lines of critique that you get from different parts of like the political spectrum, right? So on the right, it's been like the mainstream media doesn't include us for a long time now. I don't really remember that claim ever not being there in my lifetime. And of course, that's sort of where like Fox and talk radio get their success of saying like, we're filling that gap that you're not represented in the mainstream. And then from the left, it tends to be like a lot more of, they're just enthralled to corporate and government interests, like the establishment. So I think the exact nature of the distrust varies depending on your political beliefs. But I don't know. I guess there was sort of a golden age of people comparatively trusting the press in like the middle of the 20th century. But I think this applies to a lot of stuff, not just the media, but I think the middle of the 20th century was like an anomaly. It was not a historical norm, and we're not going to get back to it. And it's not something like that level of like a comparative lack of polarization. Like the major parties were fairly similar, like to the point that some commentators, you can look back in those days, were like, do we need them to be more polarized so we can have more options on policy? That's just not, it wasn't like that before. It hasn't been like that since. And so when you have more diversity going on in your politics, which is a nicer spin than polarization, but when you have more polarization, and you have now, of course, like the fragmentation of media, so we can each get our own tailored to us package of information, yes, but also we can see the contrast between what we're consuming and what other people are consuming. I think being able to see those differences by itself is a big source of skepticism and distrust of like, why are we not all receiving like the same truth? I think that it just creates unease.
I think back to the Obama administration when birtherism was a big thing. And part of the people who were really into that, one of the things that I would say was, I'm not like, the reason I don't believe that President Obama was not born on foreign soil is not because I love President Obama so much. And it's also not because, it's not because I have a naive trust in the media. It's rather that I know more how media works, which is, if you're a journalist, even if you really do love President Obama, but you're
the person who blows that story open.
That makes your career.
You do it. Yeah.
That makes your career. Yeah. You are the new Bernstein. Like you were the one. So you're going to do that. You're going to put that under the table and bury it just because you like President Obama so much. And even if that were true,
and it's not just one person.
It's a whole
hundreds.
Yeah, you're not going to be the only one who's ever going to find that. Yeah, that's right. Like, it's not because the reason I thought that was ridiculous, not because I liked Obama so much, not because I had a naive, belief in the media, but because of, the almost like capitalistic nature of journalism is like, you're going to look out for your own career. And if you find the proof, you're going to break that story. And even if it was, again, you're also probably going to be, if you're that journalist, you're also going to be knowledgeable enough to know that if you don't break it, someone else is. So you might as well be the one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is like my number one skepticism about a lot of conspiracy theories. How many people are you alleging are keeping this quiet, despite typically very strong personal benefit, like interest in benefits that they could gain from not keeping it quiet? Like, this is very frequently the case. Like, and it's why I find a lot of them so implausible. And even a lot of like the more recent conspiracy theories around like the election so implausible. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people, ordinary people, incompetent people, who could stand to gain so much attention, potentially money, tons of good things for them if they, revealed what happened, and no one's doing that. Like, people are not that smart. People are not that self-disciplined. People are not that self-sacrificing when it comes to members of the media. Like, people just don't work that way.
So you devote a good section of the book talking about conspiracy theories in general, and also specifically the election, the 2020 election. I heard once that the reason that conspiracy theories get started is because there's an event that has like outsized consequences. I think I may have heard this on John Oliver actually. But like, for instance, like 9/11, it's like people just find it hard to believe that 20 men fooled us all, basically, right? Like they were able to orchestrate this thing that was like so huge and caused wars and stuff, and like the Kennedy assassination, like really, like just all it took was one guy with a rifle, and it changed history. Like there's small cause that has this outsized consequence. But I was wondering, like, does that paradigm hold up for the election? Because it seems like, I guess it would be, because it would be it would be thousands of people, but compared to the American population, I guess that's a small number of people who would have had caused consequences for the entirety of the nation.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that it's not necessarily just a big event, but it has to be a big event perhaps where people can't get into the mindset of the other side. And so like in the run-up to, are you familiar with the idea of theory of mind?
Maybe not. I don't know.
Okay, so theory of mind is something that humans should normally develop as they grow up. Basically, it's the idea of being able to understand that other people have their own minds and make their own decisions and reason through things, and they might have different information or values than you do, and so they might reason to a different decision than you would. And so, like, little kids, very small kids, don't have this fully yet, and so, which is why, like, you might ask them, like, what would you do in this situation if you were that person, and they'll pick something that, like, that person would never pick because it makes sense to them as a 3-year-old, right? But it doesn't make sense to the other person. They can't put themselves in another person's position. And so I think for Americans, like, we're really struggling with, like, a political theory of mind where we cannot imagine being in the other side's position. And so one thing that I found really interesting in the run-up to 2020 was, so I was working at the Week then, and in our newsroom we had a little contest of everybody made their own election map, and whoever was most accurate was going to win. Oh man, what was it? I won, just so you know.
Oh,
it was it was like a signed photo of Rick Santorum or something weird like that. I have to remember what it was and what I've done with it.
I don't know if I call you the winner in that situation.
But so we all made our maps. And mine was accurate to, I think I had 2 states swapped, but they had almost the same electoral college counts, so I won. But the people on our team who were further right were doing, like, Trump landslides, and the people on our team who were further left were doing Biden landslides. And, like, this was their sincere guess because they wanted to win this contest. Like, they really thought this is what's going to happen. And I saw that, like, in a lot of places, like, people were predicting landslides, and the idea that it was going to be a landslide was just like, there was never going to be a landslide. Like, people both love and hate both of these guys. But there was a lot of sincere belief that it could not be anything but that. Like, their guy had to win. It was so obvious. Everybody hates the other guy. Like, there's no way he could win. And I think when you go into it with that mindset and then your guy doesn't win, well, there has to be some explanation for it. And they don't, because the explanation of, like, he's not popular enough to win is, like, so repulsive and so unfathomable, then there has to be some other explanation. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if Trump won. I think he totally could have won. It was close. I just don't think he did. And because, like, part of the reason why it's, like, I don't feel the need to reach for a conspiracy theory to explain what happened is that both outcomes seemed really possible to me.
Yeah. And I mean, I was kind of with you too, because I in the run-up, I paid a lot of attention to the polls. Also, it complicates things because we have an electoral college. It's not just a popular vote as well. Yeah, I think, and so I think part of the why Trump supporters found it so hard was because they would also, any poll leading up to the election that probably, and I think most polls were showing accurately that Biden was going to win, not by a lot, but by some. I saw Trump supporters rejecting those too, but not because it would have been logical to say, well, the run up to the 2016 election also showed Hillary winning. So that would have been kind of a logical reason to distrust those, but mostly they were, I feel like people were distrusting them because of some sort of fraud, some sort of, like, shady thing going on that, like, the liberal media is wanting to push this narrative kind of thing. And also there was a lot of, like, what's the word, Bonnie, for, like, the bias we have because of the people around us, like the anecdotal information that we're gathering. And, well, if you live in a Trump stronghold, or if you're attending, like, Trump boat parades, like, it is going to feel like everybody's voting for Trump, but there's a whole other nation out there. And we're also very segregated by, the divide between the urban areas and the rural areas. Like, that divide is huge. So there's this bias of the people, I know no one who likes so-and-so, therefore the whole nation must feel that way about it.
Yeah. It's been, I moved last summer from the Twin Cities to Pennsylvania, to Pittsburgh. And like our neighborhood in the Twin Cities was like 95% Democrats, and like left, like, is it going to be Liz Warren or Bernie Sanders style Democrats? And then here in Pittsburgh, it's, it's like quite purple. It's the people who are Democrats are still a majority, but like much more, Biden-y, more moderate. And it's been super interesting, like to most places are not like this in America now. It's been very interesting to observe a more mixed political environment than I had gotten used to.
So, how do we get out of this, Bonnie? Like, how? And I both mean, on the macro level as a nation, but just in our individual experiences, in the conversations we have with our family members. How do we find a way out?
Well, I think that maybe the disappointing thing about my book and what I'm going to say right now, for many people, will be that I don't think there's any like large scale solution. I think to some degree, hopefully, and I don't have any sense of how long this will take, I think to some degree maybe some things will settle down in regards to how we handle the internet, just as we become more used to this still honestly very new and very world-changing like communications technology. I mean, things got wild after the printing press came in, right? But that was like a couple hundred years. The Reformation happened. It was several hundred years of adjustment to get used to books. So I think, we're a little bit naive if we think we're going to get used to the internet in 2 decades. So I think and hope that sort of on the mass scale, some things will calm down on their own over some unknown period of time. But for now, unfortunately, I really don't think that we can like legislate or content moderate ourselves out of this. There's a lot of appetite for that, perhaps. But these proposals tend to be very ill thought out and underdeveloped, and even if we implemented them, I don't think they really get at the core issue or could sort of like stop us from just finding new places on the internet to confuse ourselves. So as in some ways dissatisfying as it is, I really think the answer is just like at an individual level and in our families and our churches and our communities, we need to be looking at our own habits and using those habits to support the development of like intellectual virtues, so that we are I don't think our information environment is going to get better anytime soon, but we can hopefully change how we are engaging it and how we are handling the information that we encounter, so that we are not making things worse, for one thing, but also not making ourselves worse, because that's a really core part of it, is not just the effect that it's having on our politics and our society, but the effect that it's having on us and how it's making us like impatient and twitchy and inattentive to one another, angry with one another, sort of like spoiling for a fight, eager to be estranged from our families as like proof of how good our politics are. I think this is sort of central to it, to understand that intellectual issues are virtues, and the way that we are behaving right now frequently is unvirtuous. It's bad, it's evil, it's harmful to ourselves and to the people we love.
Well, let me put it on me. How can I be a better discerner of truth and be a part of not get caught up in disseminating false information or playing into narratives that aren't helpful?
Yeah. Well, so you and I are sort of in an unusual position, which is that me because of my job, and you because of your podcast, your writing, also sort of engaging in like ideas publicly. We are in an unusual position of having a little bit more of a reason to be like out there in this information, like reading and absorbing things. But for the vast majority of people, and probably to a degree for us, less is a really good place to start. Like just logging off. I know that's such like a go-to explanation, but like use of our time and attention is, I think, really core here. Like, what are we devoting ourselves to? I have a list of questions in one of the final chapters of the book, and it's things like, can you wash the dishes without listening to a podcast anymore? Can you fold laundry without watching television? Like, are you able to sit down and read a book without picking up your phone every 10 minutes or at the end of every section header? Noticing these behaviors and habits in ourselves, I think, is a really good place to start. And you can't just decide to be intellectually virtuous any more than you can just, decide to like something. Like, you can't acquire a taste just by deciding it. You have to like keep practicing, making a habit of trying that thing and building that taste.
What are we, like 45 minutes in here? And I've not mentioned like the church or Jesus, which like your book is unapologetically through that lens. And I just wonder what it seems like there would be some help here in scripture and in following Jesus that would give us direction, that would give us some sort of a path through.
Yeah, there is. And one really, I think it's being part of a good church community is not alone enough to sort of keep your brain from being unbroken. But I don't know that you're going to get there without it. I think it's very fundamental rhythm of your life, of seeing people who probably think differently than you, being forced to a degree to engage with them, right? And not forced in like a negative sense, but like sometimes if you were just friends with these folks, maybe you would say like, you know what, we're too different, like it's not worth dancing around these arguments, like I just don't want to deal with this anymore. But when you go to the church together, well, if you both keep coming to church, you've got to engage with those people, and you've got to figure out a way to do it in like an appropriate and hopefully Christ-like way. So I think the use of our time and the maintenance of those relationships is really key, and worship is key as well. I mean, so much of there are a number of places where in Scripture, especially in John's Gospel and in 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, where truth and love are linked. Like these are very much related concepts that we cannot. It's difficult for us to seek truth if we're not doing so in love, and I think it's difficult to recognize truth if we're not trying to live in love. But also, truth is understanding truth enables us to love rightly. And so worship is formative for understanding what love and truth are, and for being able to recognize them elsewhere. And so the importance of church and of faith for this is about training us to recognize truthful things and good things and loving things, to be able to know it when you see it.
Yeah, you've got a beautiful section at the end of the book about, I think that this section may be titled An Epistemology of Love or something similar. And I'll just tell people to go get the book so that you can read that. But I think that one of the things that was so dismaying during all of that, and still, by that I mean the election and January 6th, was how quickly Christians were willing to give up love, to kind of cast that aside, because we're in the real world, and all that love stuff is great for Sunday school, but we're in the real world, and sometimes you got to execute people, and just it was so saddening to see Christians just very quickly, very easily throw aside love for political gains, for ends that they thought made it justified, you know?
Yeah, so without like opening a much bigger can of worms of like how Christians should be engaging in politics and like appropriate relations of Christian and the state. I do think that we have this, we frequently, and not even necessarily consciously, but by default think that when it comes to politics, or by extension, like engaging in political media, talking about it with one another, that is, you can sort of set all that church stuff aside, and like this is a different realm, and like, even if you personally wouldn't do, political violence or talk about or treat people or like play hardball the way that your candidate does, like, he can go out there and fight for you, and that's good and fine to support him doing that. And once you have sort of that subconscious assumption, all sorts of things follow from that. And, reading something that maybe isn't true, but you want it to be true, something that makes your opponents out to be perhaps worse than they are, and not really, taking the time to dig into that and think, like, maybe they're not actually this bad, and maybe I could be more loving to them. You've already set all that aside, and so it becomes much easier to just go along with sort of everything that feeds those angry emotions and gives you the excitement and the thrill that you're looking for.
That's good. Well, I am really excited about the book because I think this is one of those books that, like, I think everyone should read, but it would be a really great one to give to your friends and family. And your tone was so needed in the book because, it deals with facts. You're writing with your whole self, which is like a journalist, but also a believer. And so like there's a pastoral heart there. And so I think that it would help a lot of people kind of realize the kind of, the matrix we're living in, that we don't have to. We can choose to break out.
I hope so, and I'm glad that that's sort of the impression you've gotten as one of the first people who have read it. But I would also add that I'm writing as someone who is very much like dealing with all of this myself. Like this is something that I have to think about all of the time because it's sort of like being in journalism and writing about politics. It's a little bit like, I don't know, if you're like a plumber or you're working in like the sewer lines, you got to think about like not getting sick from all of the refuse that you're dealing with day in and day out. And like there can be a good reason for dealing with that refuse. Obviously, certainly we need like sewer lines, but that doesn't make it not risky to like handle this stuff.
Yeah, they're occupational hazards for sure. I was just reading about how some journalist on Twitter was talking about the ramifications of like watching the videos that are coming out from Uvalde, and as journalists have to do that work, and that is, boy, like so risky to your mental health, so yeah, journalists especially, and we've all got to be careful about what we're taking in.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd say very early on, like it's always possible that my brain is like the broken one, because I chose to be in lots of brain-breaking situations from my work all the time.
Well, thanks for doing the work for us, because it matters. Yeah. Well, yeah, Bonnie, thanks so much for being back on the show. It's been so good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Remember, you can find all the show notes for this show and all shows at shaneblackshear.com. Oh, and hey, have you ever thought about starting your very own podcast? I bet you have. And I think you should do it. In fact, I've created a course just for you to teach you everything that I've learned over the last couple of years producing Seminary Dropout. So if you're interested in podcasting and want to learn how, go check out my course. You can go there by typing in podcastingforeveryone.org. And you can get a special discount by typing in the discount code Seminary Dropout, all one word. That'll give you 25% off. So go check it out. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Thanks to those that left ratings and reviews on iTunes this week. Remember, that keeps the show front and center. Also, remember, you can find me on Twitter at @beardonabike. That's @beardonabike. Also, I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/ShaneBlackshear123. And remember that Seminary Dropout is listener supported. You can visit supportseminarydropout.com and press Become a Patron. Remember, this music you're listening to right now is by D.L. Rossi. You can find him online on iTunes and at dlrossi.com. All right, thanks again for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Love you. Take care.
But